So, federal district court judge Tanya Hang'em High Chutkin, at least hang 'em high when it comes to anything January 6th related. You'll note that the good judge has imposed some of the stiffest sentence on those convicted of crimes related to January 6th, sometimes going beyond prosecutors' recommendations in imposing sentence. She reinstituted the gag order on former President Trump. She agreed based on prosecutors' argument that Trump's recent social media comments about his former chief of staff, that would be Mark Meadows, represented an attempt to influence and intimidate a likely witness in the case. Trump responded, "I've just learned the very biased Trump-hating judge in D.C. who should have recused herself due to her blatant and open loathing of your favorite president, me, jeez, has reimposed a gag order which will put me at a disadvantage against my prosecutorial and political opponents, although invective directed toward the judge or his opponent, that would be President Biden, is exempted." He went on to say, "This order, according to many legal scholars, is unthinkable," including the quote-unquote legal scholars at the ACLU, which filed a brief on behalf of Trump, actually. He goes on, "It illegally and unconstitutionally takes away my First Amendment right to free speech in the middle of my campaign for president, where I'm leaning against both parties in the polls. Few can believe this is happening, but I will appeal. How can they tell the leading candidate that he and only he is seriously restricted from campaigning in a free and open manner? It will not stand." Will it? An interesting note on this. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, Obama's personal attorney, you remember.
Yes.
According to him. The Law and Order guy who is infamous for things like Fast and Furious, getting guns to Mexican drug cartels, is infamous for eavesdropping on reporters using the power of the Department of Justice. Yeah. He said that, look, any other defendant would probably be facing jail time for what Trump has communicated publicly. However, he also stressed he would be, quote, extremely reluctant, unquote, to put Trump in jail for violating the gag order. Rather, he suggests fines and the like if and when Trump crosses the line in the estimation of one Judge Chutkin. Well, let's explore that a little bit and the larger context of the state of the Trump trials. George Parry joins us. He's a former federal and state prosecutor, regular contributor to the American Spectator, and he blogs at knowledgeisgood.net. George, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. George? Do we have George?
George,
Yes.
There's George.
Good morning.
Hey, George.
Hello.
Hello. So let me have you address this talking point of the left with respect to the gag order that was on, off, now back on. With what Trump has said, any other criminal defendant similarly situated would be in prison, would be in pretrial detention. Is that true?
No. First of all, there wouldn't be a gag order. And as far as pretrial detention, this is a first. I actually agree with Eric Holder. They'd be crazy to put Trump in prison. I mean, the guy, that would just, so far, every indictment, every lawsuit has done nothing but increase his popularity among the electorate. If they put that guy in prison, just stand back.
I agree, but that's a political calculation by Eric Holder, who's just a law and order man. Imagine the left contemplating politics when deciding what to do with respect to the law.
Yeah, Mr. Law and Order, Eric Holder. No, well, that's a political calculation. But look, there wouldn't be a gag order. I don't care what these judges say. There just wouldn't be a gag order. I mean, I've represented plenty of elected officials and other public figures who've been able to say whatever the heck they want about the judge, the court, the prosecutor, witnesses, and that's never been a consideration. But now with Trump, they have these gag orders. We not only have the gag order from Judge Chutkan, we have the gag order up in New York from this Judge Ingeron
Right.
in the that cockamamie civil action that the New York Attorney General has pending against Trump. So,
But George,
uh, yeah,
Trump's comments are undermining people's confidence in courts of law, thereby imperiling our democracy, aren't they?
yeah, sure. Yeah, and the other laugher is he's going to influence the jury pool in Washington, D.C. and in Manhattan. Are you kidding me?
They're a funny group. Some of these judges and prosecutors and former attorney generals, a funny group. And as I mentioned, sort of the ACLU weighing in on behalf of Trump with respect to this gag order in D.C. That's a moment.
Yeah.
That's a sign of the apocalypse. As best as I can figure, we're in the end times right now, and you got the ACLU coming out on Trump's behalf. But look, it's such a blatant violation of the First Amendment, this gag order, that even the ACLU had to acknowledge it. How bad is that?
Well, they're trying to stop him from campaigning, from getting his voice out there. Don't
Well,
you
they
think
want
what
to
all
stop
of
him
this is
from
all about?
campaigning.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's really, on top of the intention behind the gag order, I think that they're really just trying to wear him down to the point where he's just going to throw up his hands. I mean, if you look at what's going on in New York now, in that civil action, the Attorney General's office wants to put Trump's children, or they're not children, his offspring,
Right.
on the stand and have them testify. Why do they want to do that? What could they possibly add to the case? The case has already been decided by the judge in Manhattan against Trump. So what's the purpose of having Trump's offspring, two sons and daughter, testify in that case? It's a perjury trap.
Right.
That's all it comes down to. So how do you bring a man to his knees? You go after his kids. I mean, it's almost a legal
Sad.
form of kidnapping.
Yeah.
If the kidnapper can get the parent to do whatever the kidnapper wants. If you want to see your kid again, if you don't want to see terrible things happen to your kid, then do what I tell you to do. That's what we're looking at in this otherwise ridiculous New York case. So
In that New York case, assuming, as you say, that the decision has already been reached, now they're just going through the process
yeah.
to try to legitimize it. Do you have any doubt that banishing the Trump organization from doing business in New York in New York State will be overturned on appeal?
Not in the New York court system. I mean, I mean, the Court of Appeals did put some limits on this action in terms of how applying the statute of limitations to certain of the claims, which came as a bit of a surprise. But if they go for the kill shot on Trump's business licenses and just try and absolutely destroy his holdings and his operation in New York, I don't see anybody in the New York judicial system, which is political from top to bottom, having the nerve to step forward and put an end to it.
But has this ever happened before where they drive a man out of business in the state of New York and in Manhattan?
Well, I've seen it happen in Philadelphia, but no, none of my clients were running for president. Look, I mean, what people need to understand is because somebody puts a black robe on and is handed a little wooden hammer and gets up there on the bench, what distinguishes that lawyer from any other lawyer is the fact that he knows the governor or that he ran for election. I mean, in Pennsylvania, we elect our judges, God help us. And so the whole process in and of itself is political.
Well, we do the
So
same
the I,
in Yeah, we do the same in Cook County, and we couldn't have a better judicial system. Of course, I'm kidding. That's hilarious. Yeah, another
I've
punchline
heard.
here when we're talking about the criminal justice system. But just on the legal aspects of this, if
Yeah.
this is the kangaroo court that it appears to be, couldn't Trump have this removed to federal court and file a civil rights action against the attorney general?
He could try and file a civil rights action after the fact. I don't see how he would get this removed to federal court. I don't see that as a viable maneuver. But I mean, what's Trump going to do? What are his kids going to do when they're called to the stand? I mean, this judge Trump's already testified once in connection with Judge Engeron. That's the New York judge. He's already testified once in regard to the judge's gag order. And the judge has said, I find your testimony to not be credible. So we already have one finding that Trump lied under oath. So what do you do when you're faced with that bitter choice? If you go in there and say, I'm taking the fifth, I'm not answering any questions, well, that's political ammunition that you're handing to your opposition. So I mean, look, if I was representing Trump, I would tell him we got to thread the needle here. I'd just give him a pre-prepared statement. You know, this is a political show trial. This judge is corrupt, who's already decided the case. There's no point in testifying. We have a politically motivated and corrupt attorney general who will charge me with perjury no matter what I say. And so I'm taking the fifth, not because I'm guilty of anything, but because this is a corrupt proceeding and presided over by a corrupt judge, and anything I say will be used against me by this corrupt attorney general. You know, words to that effect.
Now, George Parry, I just wanted to move on because last week you wrote an article about what killed George Floyd. Have you gotten any pushback from that? And we should tell people, too, they could read it at knowledgeisgood.net.
Well, this time around I didn't. I've been writing about that subject for years now. I mean, right when George Floyd died, as soon as I got a hold of the autopsy report and read it, I concluded that those police officers had not killed George Floyd. As a matter of fact, if you review the body camera video of their interaction with George Floyd, they did nothing to harm the man. And as a matter of fact, were quite considerate of him as they're trying to get him into the patrol car while he's still upright and mobile. He's shouting, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Don't put me in that car. So what do these cops do? One of them says, we'll roll down the window. And another one says, we'll turn on the air conditioning. These are the brutal cops that we're being told are so brutal that they choked out this man in front of a crowd with cell phone cameras before effectively the entire world. They did it right out there in the open. That's what we've been told. That's what the state of Minnesota has pushed from day one. And so this article that I did last week was just a recap of what I had written before. This was a terrible injustice.
Well, the new information that we have comes from civil depositions by former Hennepin County prosecutors, in which one who filed a sexual discrimination suit against the former chief prosecutor in Hennepin County said that the conversation she had with the coroner, initially he said that I can't find asphyxiation as a cause of death here, and asked her, how do you say something that won't be believed by the entire world that has already bought the determination in the public that it was the cops who killed George Floyd. Now, she also, prosecutors that testified in that civil trial, all were deposed in that civil trial, also did separate this. We would have gone for second-degree murder with respect to Chauvin, separating Chauvin from the other cops. He violated procedure. There's other problems with what Chauvin did. But the other cops, they couldn't make out a case, and this was a point of contention between some of these rank-and-file prosecutors and the district attorney there. And so my question is, based on those depositions from former Hennepin County prosecutors, wouldn't the cops not named Derek Chauvin have a pretty good case to demand a retrial?
Well, they've been convicted by a jury, a terrified jury in a war zone, I might add. But they've been convicted, and getting that undone is going to be very difficult. And understand, what came out in that deposition was actually known back as it was happening. The medical examiner in Hennepin County, when he published his first draft of his autopsy findings, he said, look, there was no damage to the neck structures. There was no sign of asphyxiation, basically, if you read through the whole thing. And what happened? Well, number one, the DA or the county attorney was unhappy with that. But then the medical examiner got this phone call from the medical examiner in Washington, D.C., a very angry and political man who said, look, you don't want to be the only smart person in the room who doesn't see what's obvious. In other words, get on board with changing your report to indicate that the police killed Floyd. And so what the medical examiner in Hennepin County did was he came out with a revised report where the physical findings remained the same, but then he just threw in some crazy line about some connection to police subdual, whatever subdual is. And he then got on the stand and testified in effect, and he admitted this on cross, I couldn't find any physical signs, but my overall conclusion is, this was caused by what the cops did. I mean, it was just a stunning performance. And in the course of these depositions you're talking about, the medical examiner said to one of the prosecutors, look, what do you do when the physical evidence doesn't match up with the narrative? This is the kind of thing that can end careers.
Right.
Which was just a perfect statement of chickening out in the face of adversity. And that's what happened here.
Yeah, and he had cardiac arrhythmia, he had high blood pressure, he had hypertension, and he also had fentanyl and meth in his system. And I don't think that was broadcast enough during the trial.
Well, it came out on cross-examination. And look, I never want to criticize Nelson, the defense lawyer, because he was the guy in the trenches. I thought it took a lot of guts for him to take that case and litigate it in that court and under those circumstances, because basically it was mob rule. Yeah. But that came out, but not in a very effective manner. And what you had really was sudden onset cardiac arrhythmia, because Floyd had severe coronary artery disease. He had a history of hypertension. He had enough fentanyl in his system to kill an elephant. And you combine that with the methamphetamine he had in his system, that increases the likelihood of sudden onset cardiac arrhythmia. So there were plenty of other reasons for Floyd to be dead, none of them having to do with what the police officers did. But Minneapolis had been burned to the ground. At the beginning of Chauvin's case, the mayor of Minneapolis forks over $27 million to the Floyd